20 years ago, we were talking about blockchain already, all that information. And then we are sitting here today and we are still discussing about the same topic.
Most of the time you don't have full visibility on your shipments. You hand it over and sometimes it's even, when you get the proof of delivery, that's the moment you know, okay, everything went well. So it's, for us, sometimes it's a black box.
A lot of the times we find out that the problems are on the planning phase.
And then they throw the problem over the fence, so to say, and they just expect their 3PL to handle everything and do it correctly and up to their expectations.
But at the end of the day, at the end of the supply chain, there's a patient, yeah? And if I take a pill, I want to be sure that this is valid and that this works for me and not hurting me.
Today we want to talk about, in this panel, about supply chain orchestration, which is a theme actually very connected to some of the other topics that we hear all the time in supply chain management. Some of you may have been at Pharma earlier this year. I think two of the main topics were AI and resilience, also topics that came up already in the presentations today. And actually supply chain orchestration is very much related to that. In order to be resilient in your supply chain, it requires you to respond to events that happen. And this is where supply chain orchestration comes in. I don't know about the real definition of supply chain orchestration, but I would define it more or less as the coordination of decisions and actions to ensure that the shipment arrives in time and without incidents, particularly when something goes not according to plan. Right? This is when orchestration and this kind of coordination becomes most critical. And it will be one of the main topics, I think, for the further evolution of pharmaceutical logistics in the coming years. And that's also why I'm very excited to discuss this with our three panelists. So I will just invite them one by one and then ask them to give a short introduction about themselves. Stefanni, we're starting with you as the head of Pharma for Delta. So please introduce yourself.
Sure, thank you. My name is Stefanni Souza, and I lead pharmaceutical products for Delta Cargo. And the focus of my role is to develop new solutions and to maintain our pharmaceutical solutions with Delta. I have over 15 years with supply chain industry, and I'm very passionate about what we do in the pharmaceutical businesses, and I'm very happy to be here.
Yes, go. Great to have you here. Yes, thank you. Next, we will move on to Martin at DP World.
Yeah.
Please give an introduction, Martin.
Thank you, Elko. Yeah, Martin Stratmann is my name. So roundabout now, if I include my traineeship, 30 years in the supply chain industry, half of it involved in pharmaceutical logistics. Currently in charge for the GDP compliance in Europe for DP World. Before that, I was a global quality manager for healthcare at Schenker. And before that, I also was working for DHL in that same area.
Yep. Thank you, Martin. Yeah, and finally, someone who I think also joined for the first Digital Consortium Forum back in 2018 already. Yes. We've known each other for more than 8 years, Ruben. So please give an introduction of yourself as well.
Yes, so my name is Ruben van Duijvenvoorde. I'm an independent consultant, mainly working in QA and supply chain. Today I'll share my experience from multiple pharmaceutical companies that I worked for. Today I will tackle the pharma side in this panel.
Yes, thank you very much, Ruben. And I think the composition of this panel also illustrates very well what we envision for Validaide. So really providing a community for collaboration between all the different stakeholders in pharmaceutical logistics, having the airline, forwarder and manufacturing side represented here. So it's great to have you, and I think maybe we should sit down, because now it's also up to the audience to kick off this panel discussion. Because before we dive into the discussion about orchestration, we actually have 2 questions for you, so please grab your phone. And this is a question we also asked at our event 2 years ago. And this is just not based on facts, this is just about your feeling. You all are actively working in pharmaceutical logistics, and we want to know what percentage of all 2-8 shipments, particularly in air and ocean, have some kind of incident. And there's no right or wrong, it's just your impression about it. So we are at 48, so I think that's probably it. Very interesting distribution, I have to say. We did this also 2 years ago. There's actually quite a big group also in the 0 to 2%. But the biggest group is actually the highest option we provided is more than 8%. And it's by no means a scientific research, but I do think it illustrates, because there's also a big group of 5 to 8%. So around 30 people almost indicate that more than 5% of all shipments, 2 to 8 shipments, still face some kind of incident. And that is definitely something that is very significant because it illustrates that maybe we've come a long way in pharmaceutical logistics, but it's also really inherently complex and still things go wrong. And this also makes orchestration and being able to respond to incidents and coordinate actions very critical. All right, next question. We're going to talk about coordination and taking actions and taking decisions to follow up on these incidents. Where do you see most coordination gaps happening, particularly between companies? We have a lot of different options. I hope they are more readable on your phone than on the screen. This is interesting, actually.
Yeah.
It's nice to see, huh? We're following it here also on this screen here. We are at 44. Okay. I think this is already good. Well, actually, it feels a bit like a Eurovision Song Contest or something. Right? You see, oh, we have more votes for this option.
Who is gonna win?
Yeah, who's going to win? Yeah. And our votes go too. Wow, they're still being voted here. It's still not decided. This is a very close race, actually. Yeah. We have 2 contenders, neck to neck.
9 votes to go.
So you can still make a difference, right, by voting. So you can make a real impact here. Well, maybe we should stop here. Ooh, one more vote. Yeah. Well. Ooh, 52. Oh! Yeah, and it's a tie. It did make a difference, right? Who made that final vote? You did make a difference. All right. All right. Well, that's it. Then it's a tie.
No.
Oh, no, someone couldn't resist. Okay, we're going to stop it now. Because now we have a winner. Oh, can we still see the results? Okay. Here it disappeared. Yeah, so, well, thank you very much for voting. I think this is probably one of the most rewarding online votes you've done, right? Because it was really making a difference here. It's quite spread. We see data sharing being the number 3, which is not surprising maybe. But we see 2 really clear answers that stood out. One is, in general, handover points between supply chain partners, so actually the winner. But this is quite a generic. But yeah, of course, when you have multiple parties, the handover points are, of course, always a risk. And then finally, the cargo handling at airports or terminals. And I think this is also a very well-known topics. That I think, particularly in air freight, it is assumed that a lot of the excursions happen because of the, particularly on the tarmac, but in general at the ground handling agent. All right. Thank you very much for voting. I think this was a very good start, setting the scene for what we're going to talk about today. And we are pretty pressed on time. And we could, with these experts, we could talk probably for hours on this topic of supply chain orchestration. So we need to speed up a little bit. I will do my best to manage time. Yeah, I just want to have a quick answer from the 3 of you, following up on the last question. So do these answers that you saw confirm your own experience? So where do you see the biggest coordination gap? And maybe I'll start with Stefanni, as the lady in the audience.
Of course, almost the winner, right? And of course, as we join panels like this, we can see like this kind of responses, right? Because I think that's the impression that like most audience can have about ocean freighters and airline operators. And of course, in our reality, from our perspective, and that's something, I don't know if we can have the data back on the screen, if you can, Maria, the results. There you go. And because that's something that, like, from our reality, and when we look at our data to see root causes and where is our let's say, our failure is, a lot of the times we find out that the problems are on the planning phase. And I think our planning showed up here as like maybe 2 votes on the planning phase, right? I think we are very transparent on the way we do things. We put our information public. Everyone has a good visibility of tarmac and how we're handling like these misconnections or cancellations. And a lot of times when we're analyzing this data we receive from tracking devices, we're operating within our SOPs and standard procedures, but it's still planning, packaging, even the routes were not chosen properly. And we see these things, sometimes it's difficult to have conversations how we're addressing our failures because there is very minor room for improvements, right? And then the planning sometimes is the best way that you can address this kind of impressions and situations. Because when something is standard in our possession, we're in the middle of the transportation cycle, right? So if something on our standard procedures and our reality goes as planned, is moving as planned, there is very little actions that we can do to save that shipment, right? So I think that's very important that when we look at this perspective, like how planning and preparing your shipment sometimes is mislooked, right? People sometimes don't do the risk assessments as they should to prevent that these 2 areas, of when you're transmitting these shipments to one to another, and the tarmac area is not seeing as many issues that we see.
Yeah, I think your answer makes me think a little bit about what Marijke said earlier today about also flagging high-risk shipments. So, for example, now there's a heat wave in Europe that might be result in some extra risk. So actually in the planning phase, maybe there's room actually to do more. But let's park that one, because we have more to do. I don't know, Martin, from your perspective, what's your view on these answers?
To be honest, they surprised me a little bit, but that may be because I understood the question differently, maybe. So we try to say it's the coordination gaps, but maybe the audience also understood where are the deviations most often appear, yeah? So because from the coordination point of view, I would rather highly more rank the exception and disruption management and also the data sharing, that's for sure. Yeah. And it's not one of the topics, it's more or less always a combination at the end of the day. So that's where I would see it at the moment. So I'm a little bit surprised, but again, maybe different understanding of the question, which is fair enough.
Yeah, I follow that reasoning. Maybe Ruben, you want to add something to that?
Yeah, so from a shipper perspective, I do understand this because if you look at the circle of influence that you have, the further it gets away from you, the more gaps appear or seem to be appearing. And I think that's that's true. It's hard to keep control over shipments that you leave up to a 3PL and then a 4PL and all the supply chain partners in the supply chain. So I do understand it. I also agree with Martin that sometimes if you really look at where is the coordination failing, then it's more the exception management and the issue management, because sometimes it's simply difficult to identify the right stakeholders and decision makers.
All right. Interesting. And that actually then leads me directly to the next question, follow up to this. Where do you see the main challenges in supply chain orchestration from a manufacturing or shipper's perspective? Yeah,
so that's a good question. I think that it's mainly that you're depending on on your 3PL. So there are not a lot of pharma companies that can do the whole shipment organization themselves. And it really depends on your collaboration with the 3PL. If you have a successful supply chain or not. That's how I see it. So some pharma companies, they really see that as outsourcing, and then they throw the problem over the fence, so to say, and they just expect their 3PL to handle everything and do it correctly and up to their expectations. I think that's too simple, and you really need to build a long-term collaboration with your 3PL to make sure that they are really doing it the way you want it, and also that they really invest in you as a customer, and you're not there for 3 years and then move on to the next cheapest 3PL. I think that's not a good way of working. Yeah. So going from just outsourcing to really that collaboration, and I think the presentation this morning with the co-creation is a good example of that. I think we should do that more often. All right, and a quick follow-up question, because I think we also heard from Rijk, but we hear it more often, that there's something called alert fatigue, basically. Yeah. As a manufacturer, you also don't want to be overloaded with all kinds of alerts. I assume you expect your forward or your LSP basically to take on the burden of managing incidents or managing exceptions, or is that not fair? No, I think it's you can put that at the 3PL for sure. I think they have the best visibility on what's going on, but upfront you really need to make need to give clear guidance. When is it in a deviation? Mm-hmm. So all the other things can be handled by the 3PL, and there needs to be a trigger, and that they inform you, and that can be also like a pre-alarm. That's also fine. It really depends on the pharma shipper. It really depends on the type of product. It really depends on the risk of that lane. But you need to be clear up front what you expect from them. And for example, a recent example that I encountered was a truck shipment in Europe, and I think it was like 4:30, and we got an email. Yeah, we have an ongoing temperature excursion, which was already ongoing for 5 hours. So at the very end of the day, you get the question: can we still deliver this to the customer? And then you need to make overtime to find all the stability data and give an answer on that. Yeah. And then, I mean, it's already ongoing for 5 hours, so it's at least 4.5 hours too late. And I think these are the things that you really need to focus on. That you have, that you give them clear instructions when to inform you and how to inform you. Yeah. So they are defining very good and clear responsibilities and processes. Yes. In terms of orchestration is one of the preconditions to be successful. Yes. Okay. Well, then Martin, we move to you as the forwarder, the other side. What makes orchestration difficult for you to align all these different parties? Yeah. Especially during these kind of situations like a deviation?
Yeah, I would say in general, it's our job to coordinate the shipments and so on. Yeah, that's the main turf. But pharma logistics is a different beast at the end of the day, because it's sensitive of cargo, that's for sure. And the main challenge from my point of view is really to think and to see about the data which is available. Because we're talking about the silos already several times today, and that we want to break it up or to break it down. On the other hand, first of all, instead of breaking down the silos with different parties, you also have to think about to break down the silos at your own party. Mm-hmm. Yeah, because sometimes you don't really get the information you want to have. I mean, it's nice if I know, for example, and just an example, yeah, if you get to an airport or you get the timestamp, okay, the cargo is not on the flight. That's fine. But then I also need to know where's the cargo exactly at the moment. Mm-hmm. Is it still on the tarmac? Is it already back into the warehouse? Mm-hmm. And that information we don't have, yeah? So that's why, and then it comes also to the situation where, I think Sebastian says so, that they're still working with Excel sheets, yeah? So, and then the level of the carriers is a different one. Mm-hmm. And not only the carriers, also the freight forwarders, everybody involved, yeah? Mm-hmm. So it's not a single, you can finger point to somebody. Mm-hmm. It's more a general approach of the industry. So from my point of view, the technology is there. We just need to really make use of it. We need to invest in it. And then we need to also to have the openness to collaborate and to share the information, yeah? Because that's still a big issue at the moment. Because some companies still think that they don't want to share if there's a deviation to protect themselves. Or maybe will nobody find out, yeah? And that's definitely, I think, the wrong approach, having in mind, and maybe somebody get out of this thing, but at the end of the day, at the end of the supply chain, there's a patient, yeah? And if I take a pill, I want to be sure that this is valid and that this works for me and not hurting me.
Yep.
So
So just to interpreting your answer maybe a little bit,
please.
based on my experience, I think airlines are very good in providing flight status updates.
Yeah.
But what you need also for orchestration is a shipment status update. What is exactly the location and the status of a individual shipment?
Yeah.
Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct, but it's not only to the airlines, it's also
No.
to the ocean
I didn't mean it to
carriers.
the airlines.
No, yeah. No, and also, for example, if we make use of a third-party cross-dock facility or something, yeah, that you really can get the information of the data, of the milestones, connected with temperature, and that is the thing, I think, where the entire industry need to involve still. Because that is a little bit of missing. And yeah, I would say it's quite frustrating on the one end, yeah? And that's again the willingness, because 20 years ago we were talking about blockchain already, all that information. And then we are sitting here today and we are still discussing about the same topics, yeah? So there's really the need, and there why I see really the need for one independent, or not maybe one, but at least for an independent forum where you can share those information, where you can share the data, and so that not somebody own really the data, but it's shared. I think that would be the best solution at the end of the day. Yeah.
Makes sense. Then we come to the airline side, and you also have a critical role. Also quite challenging, because you're also a bit in the middle between your customers, but also depending on ground handling agents in your network. At your main hubs, I'm sure you do your own handling at Delta, but for the outside network, you also depend on external ground handling agents. What information or capabilities would be helpful for you to better fulfill your responsibilities?
Yeah, so as we're in the middle, we have very limited access to data, right? And all we can do and see is based on our own scanning points. So from one airport to airport, we have countless scanning points. I think you guys would be impressed to see how many of those we have. So we know exactly where your shipment is. We know exactly when the airplane has landed, when the crew has left with vehicles to go to the tarmac and recover that shipment, when they made it back, when they breaking down, when they put in the cooler. We have full visibility of all these points of the transportation. And of course, our recovery, our actions, they will all be based on the information that we have access to. And something that we don't know, and I think it was never be shared with us in a proactive way, is what is the contingency that we have when we fail, right?
Yeah.
For how long that package can resist, and what is the tolerance of that drug that is inside of the package, right? Because that level of information can help us to really take actions that are appropriate for the condition, right? And I can use an example. Not too long ago, we had a flight that was diverted because some safety concerns at the arrival airport. And this diversion airport, when the flight landed, the station manager called me. He's like, hey, this flight was diverted to my station, and I see there are 7 error bills with Pharma.
Yeah.
However, that station was not a certified Pharma station for Delta. This station manager didn't have coolers. He didn't have plugs to charge the containers. His staff was not trained, so no one knew what to do, right? So, okay, let's plan, let's make this happen, let's save the shipments. In 2 hours, we had 2 trucks already assigned for the temperatures to truck the shipments to the correct airport. A transit time of 5 hours, nothing crazy, but the arrival times were also pretty tight because the station needed to close. We moved everything as we planned, as we could. We protected the shipments at all times. And 3 customers were actually impacted by this deviation, and 2 of them didn't even notice that the shipments were 12 hours delayed. They were very pleased that we protect the shipments, but there was just this one specific customer that the product was not really sensitive. Therefore, he didn't pack for a deviation, right? The planning was for a 2-day transit time, and that was already too late for the gel packs and the way that shipment could like be preconditioned and continue the journey. So we made the best decisions as we could, but there is still like a specific packaging, a specific drug that he would have the preference that we keep the shipment at that airport, that we deviated because he had a station that could do a repacking, do a proper like packaging to continue the journey, and they would even prefer to continue the journey themselves. But these are like instances and situations that we don't have the full visibility what they can sustain, right?
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that. I think that's a very concrete example of the realities of air freight logistics, right?
Yeah, may I add something
Sure.
to that? Because you're fully right that we also, so collaboration and information exchange is not only one way, yeah? So we also need to have the other way, and especially when you think about those passive shipments, yeah? Sometimes they are packed one day before, and then they get out of life cycle, because then you will count the time from when the cargo is overhanded to you, yeah? And that's then really the challenge at the end of the day. So you still think we are in good order, but at the end of the day, you lost already one day, just because you don't have the information. So that would be also something maybe for the industry and in general, also to put that information as a requirement on the airway bill, yeah, as information to be shared, so that you really work with real data.
Yep.
Yeah.
Good,
That's
good,
why I
good.
really appreciate your example.
Yeah, thank you, thank you. I want to move on to a final question from my side, and then we open it up to the audience. And that is the move from reactive to proactive. And this comes up a lot in our discussions. This is what we would like as an industry, right? Instead of responding to an incident that has already happened, what can we do earlier to prevent that incident from happening in the first place? I think that topic will also be aligned with some of the workshops this afternoon, right, Maria? But for now, I just want to get your view. What is required in the industry to make this transition from more reactive to proactive incident management? I don't know who wants to start.
Yeah, I think it all comes back to the data fragmentation that we're always talking about. Especially as a pharma shipper, most of the time you don't have full visibility on your shipments. You hand it over, and sometimes it's even when you get the proof of delivery, that's the moment you know, okay, everything went well. So it's, for us, sometimes it's a black box. And I think having that visibility, making sure that your 3PL has a platform that you can log into, that you get automated alarms from, I think that's already a big win. That can, and then you can take it to the next step. For example, making pre-alarms. Okay, something is about to go out of spec. Let's go and look into it. What can we do? But of course, you can have that real-time visibility. But if you don't have a 3PL or a 4PL that can do something about it, then it doesn't make sense to have it. So I think that's also important, that we can talk about like seeing the problems proactively, but then we also need to have processes in place to act on it.
Excellent answer, thank you. I don't know, you want to add something to that, Stefanni?
Yeah, I have, I'd say, a little bit of different opinion on that. Because I'm a big supporter of risk assessments, like, and how you prepare and how you are risk assessing a route. And something that is missing is not only when you do that in a correct way, right? And you use real data to do that. If you can extract data from your past 100 shipments to a lane, to a provider, to really identify what's the risk, so you can be proactive and mitigate the risk, but it's how you share that data with your providers. Because most of the time, I think I'm not even being considered for a route, or I'm not like the owner of the route anymore because something that we are not doing great, right? Something that we have to do differently, right? And that feedback sometimes don't come to us, right? So for me, it's like how you plan and how you share, right? The result of your planning.
Yep.
Right? So then you
There's
can
still
really
steps to
drive
take,
changes.
what you're saying, in terms of sharing information across the ecosystem.
Exactly.
Yeah, to all the stakeholders. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Martin, you want to add to that?
Yeah, I would also agree on that. I mean, we saw it from CSL today, so how they orchestrate it with the risk assessment and involving the other parties, and that's definitely the right approach. So we still see quality agreements which we receive where there are unrealistic requirements, for, let's say, calibration of an ocean freight container. So I really can hardly see an ocean freight container calibrated as a standard norm. They do the pre-trip inspection and so on, and the reality proves that this is working, But having that in mind, and this is just an example, that they think that it is like it, that you just have to calibrate this stuff over there or temperature mapped, that's an issue, Same goes sometimes when you really break down the supply chain and to present it and say, this is one step, this is the other step, and that then you realize that if you load an air freight compartment, that is the ambient air going around. It's not like a fridge where you open the door, you put in the stuff, and then you close it, and everything is fine. No, it takes time until you can recool the compartment and so on, And that is the awareness is not there. So therefore, we really need to have this more collaboration approach to really think about and also listen to the experts on the one end who do logistics business, but also to listen then to the manufacturers who are the experts in their products, and who know about stability data, the packaging they use, and so on. So,
thank you. I'm trying to wrap around this in my head. What I hear is, first of all, that there's still steps to be taken in connecting the data together. Then second, to share that data among the stakeholders. And then third, to define responsibilities and processes on that information. And then base that also on sharing the expertise of all the different stakeholders in a collaborative way. Okay, well, that's at least a summary for myself. And with that, I think we have time for questions from the audience to the people. So if you have a question to one of the three panelists, then please raise your hand. If not, then I can have a final question for all of you as well.
Oh, there's one.
Yeah, hi. Very interesting discussions over the last few minutes. It seems like hearing you all, you know the problem. It's a problem which has been there for many years. I think, Martin, you mentioned. It seems like data seems to be one of the themes that I'm hearing. What is stopping then? What is stopping the pharma manufacturers to really get this real-time visibility then, from your perspective?
So it's not the manufacturers or the freight forwarders, the carriers. It's really the collaboration at the end of the day, So everybody wants it, but it seems sometimes that not one of them is really doing the first step, And as I said, I think in the beginning, it said that it already starts there, that you may have now a milestone where the shipment is, but then you have other information, if you're lucky, what is the temperature at the moment, Or where is the cargo really at the end of the day? And those informations are not really connected because they're different systems. So that's where I say you need also to break down the silos in your own area first, and then you can share the connected data, How you do it, that's a good question at the end of the day, because it's always also related to investments, And then there's a price tag, and that's compliance is not cheap at the end of the day. That's for sure.
And I think
to your point, I think there is very little opportunities that you can have all the players together to have a constructive conversation, right? Because it gets very difficult when something goes wrong and we gotta find a responsible, right? I think that's my second event with Validaide in this forum, and I think the environment that we have here, I think is right? We're trying to collaborate, share our experiences, I think in a very healthy, friendly way, but we don't see that on a day-to-day basis. So I think we're really lacking opportunities to have this kind of open-minded conversations in a way that we can really collaborate.
You want to add to that, Ruben?
Yes, I think it's also very important to have long-term relationships. So as a shipper with your 3PL, because otherwise they won't make that investment. And I think it's for all the shippers here in the audience, it's a good goal to build those long-term relationships, and then you can really go to the next step and have the 3PL make that investment. In the end, it's all about money. That's the money makes the world go around. That's the honest truth, and I think you need to. You also need to take that step as a shipper.
Maybe I can comment a little bit from my perspective on this question, because it's a very valid point that you're raising. I recognize it very much. But I do have to say that in the last 2 years, I think I've seen a shift in the industry. I think in the end, the push needs to come from the pharmaceutical manufacturers. They will drive this change, and we do definitely see in the last 2 years different expectations and different plans from pharma manufacturers, including also investments in these kind of solutions. And I think CSL is one of the examples that we saw earlier today, but we see this also with our other customers. They really are evolving in this maturity curve. They started with moving lane risk assessments from Excel to a digital platform, but now they're really taking the next steps as well. So I'm positive about the developments in the next few years. Maybe in 2 years when we have the next forum, we will see more examples of that.
We'll get there eventually.
Yeah. Yes, go ahead.
Certification of the processes in regards to the airports and the airlines and the ground handlers, cargo handlers. Could I get your take on that in regards to GDP or CIV, or what is important for the shipper and I guess primarily the shipper in regards to these certifications? Does it matter? Is it worth these,
Yes.
It seems like very few are CIV and a lot is GDP. So maybe your comments on this also?
Yeah, are you a shipper? Who are you? Okay, airline. Okay. Let me rethink my answer. Then no. Well, as an airline partner, I would highly recommend you that you go through that path because it's not an easy process, right? I don't know what a level of certification you're looking for. The way we did things, we decided to certify our headquarters level, so which means every single place that we do pharma has been considered for your audit. And we also decided to do this in our largest hubs, which are Atlanta and JFK, mainly because of the volumes that we were handling on those facilities. And what these standards, they mandate to us is to really have a quality management system that works and you can provide with evidence, right? And that's where our preference in having this in a local level, because then you can have local quality management systems with responsible people that will manage the local exceptions. So that's our preference, and the checklist and this whole process, it's endless, but it's worth it, right? Every 2 or 3 years, you have an auditor that you never know who it is. You knock your door and review all of these evidences and make sure that, like, on a day-to-day basis, you're doing what you're supposed to do, right? So it's not me saying, dear customer, I am doing these things. No, there's someone else that will come, again, every 2 or 3 years. It depends on the cadence. They will look for evidences that you don't know what is on the checklist. They will spot check what they believe is your weak points. And that stamp is gonna tell that you're doing your work. And from that moment, believe me or not, things get easier because you have processes, you have ownership, you have structure and everything that you need to perform the job.
I'd like to hear it from Ruben and Marty.
Yeah.
What is your take on this? Because I'm not sure that this is being given the same value as an airline. We are also CIV.
Yeah.
So we know the process, but I'm not sure it's a deciding factor for many shippers.
It can be. So if you're shipping to a certain country and you can choose from 2 airports that you can fly to and then have a 3-hour truck ride, then it can be a decisive factor, definitely. In the end, you want to protect your product as much as possible. Sometimes, for some products, it's worth paying a premium for a very good dedicated pharma service at an airline. So, yeah, it really depends on the type of product, of course, but what we see now with a lot of course, new technologies, they can be really sensitive temperature-wise. So yeah, it can be a decisive factor.
Yeah. So when you really ask me on my honest opinion, when they introduced IATA CIV, the statement was, forget about GDP, you only need IATA CIV. I said, no, not really, because IATA CIV Pharma is only an option to please GDP requirements, yeah? So at the end of the day, you need more or less have both, or one is the same. When it comes to that, but it doesn't really mean only that you check the boxes and that you really implement it and so on. So you need to do it right in the first time. What I'm coming from is, so I recently has audited a company which is based in Ireland, and so they had even a wholesaler license. And I went in and I had to give them major deviations because of the document management system. Numbering wrong, effective dates wrong, all that stuff. And I was thinking to myself, what is going on here? Yeah, I mean, you have a wholesaler license, and I'm from a forwarder coming here to audit you as a subcontractor and identify all those things. So bring it back to the point, it always relates on the auditor and the knowledge of the auditor. Yeah, because you can have a perfect auditor in the pharmaceutical industry who knows everything about GMP, but if that person is then auditing a freight forwarder or an airline, he may completely fail because he just don't know the rules, yeah, and the circumstances around it. So therefore, you always need to really send the right person, and that gives you much more than if you're just checking it or if you have a perfect checklist, but you don't understand what's behind it.
I think as a recommendation, just to change like, maybe your perspective, but every time we're implementing a new flight, we're looking at a new airport, we're looking at a new location, I usually come on board to assess what that airport can offer, who are the players and who we are selecting to do our handling. I usually don't even look on handlers that are not either GDP or CAV, because first, the conversations and the implementation of the location will be way more difficult because then you need to teach the standards, right? Usually when the players, they come to you, they are your customers, right? So you can put yourself on the, actually they are providers and you're the customer. So you can put yourself at the customer point of view and see like who I wanna hire to handle my flight. That can probably help you to answer that, but for us the implementation gets much more easier when you have a provider that is compliant to those standards.
All right. Yeah, thank you.